Good evening, everyone. This is Dawn. On behalf of ASQ Toronto section, I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar and invite you to join us for online learning opportunities via ASQ Toronto section free webinars. Please note that this webinar is recorded and the recording will be available on ASQ Toronto website as well as ASQ Toronto YouTube channel. There will be 5 to 10 minutes time after the presentation for questions and answers. Please post your questions on the Q&A section of the WebEx tool. You will be given 0.1 RU recertification unit for attending this webinar if you attend at least 40 minutes or more, as well as filling out the survey. The survey will be sent to you after the webinar session. Now, I'd like to welcome our speaker, Dr. John Padfield. Thank you, John, for accepting to be our speaker tonight. The title of this webinar is Using Crowdsourced Funding as a Predictor of Market Demand for Innovation. Numerous academic studies have identified the two primary drivers of innovation as technology push, what technology advances make possible, and demand pull, what customers want to buy. One problem individuals and companies often face is that it is an expensive and time-consuming process to bring a new product to market only to find and learn after the fact that there is little market demand for the product. This presentation examines the potential use of crowdsourced funding as a predictor for estimating market demand. The learning objectives are the pros and cons of traditional ways of predicting market demand for new products, new methods of predicting market demand using online analytics in general, historic patterns in Kickstarter funding levels for various product categories, and how those funding levels correlate with current market demand. Tonight, our speaker is Dr. John Padfield. John Padfield earned his PhD in Technology, Leadership, and Innovation from Purdue University. He is the president of Proffer Brainchild Analytics and Innovation, a training and consulting firm that specializes in process improvement and innovation through the use of data analysis. Dr. Padfield has consulted for hospitals, law enforcement, manufacturing companies, and the Indiana Senate. And he has also a speaker at numerous conferences across North America, South America, Europe, and Australia. Now I'd like to hand over to John Padfield. John, please take it away.
Thank you, Dawn. Tonight, as was mentioned in the synopsis, we're going to look at some problems that face innovators. I want to just point out this study is still a work in progress. I would love to be able to give you an absolute conclusion, but it is still a work in progress, so I can show you what's been done to date. There's some promising aspects to this research, but it is not finished yet. And I also want to point out this is really a mix of qualitative and quantitative information. I have, with a couple of students, I have collected a lot of information about crowdsourced funding, and I'll be sharing that with you at the end of this presentation. But this is still largely a qualitative study, just trying to determine is funding levels from crowdsourced campaigns, is that really a predictor of market demand or not? But I want to start by setting the stage and looking at some of the traditional problems with the status quo. There are numerous academic studies that look at where does innovation actually occur. And those two forces are frequently referred to as technology push and market pull. And when I look at these two main drivers of innovation, technology push takes the form of basic research that universities may be doing. They may be looking at a new type of polymer with some unique characteristic or some new method of casting certain types of metals. But universities are very often engaged in technology push where they're doing the basic research, not necessarily creating a new product that someone wants, but creating new tools or new materials. Also, some companies will have an internal R&D department. Now, the research part is much more of seeing what's possible. The development gets more into taking what the researchers have come up with and turning it into a product. But between universities, corporate R&D departments, they're doing this basic research, finding new components, finding new materials, new processes. This basic research basically amounts to building blocks. Those building blocks can then be assembled by people to either make existing products better or possibly to create brand new products. I'll just give one quick example here. Due to basic research that has taken place, we have seen miniaturization of electronics, cameras. Now you can go out and buy Wi-Fi cameras, products like the Blink security camera system, Simply Safe. There's a number of other competitors out on the market, but for a few tens of dollars, you can buy cameras that 20 years ago would have been hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So that the basic research has enabled miniaturization and mass production of things. That basic research then translates into lower cost products that the market seems to be very attracted to. So that's one source of where innovation comes from, the technology push. The other source is called market pull. This is what customers want. In some cases, it could be business-to-business demand. In other cases, it's going to be business-to-consumer demand, just depending on what the product is. But these are my two forces. What do customers want? Well, whether they're a business or whether they're an individual consumer, customers are always asking for better, faster, cheaper, better quality, faster microprocessors, faster service, lower cost. That's kind of a universal what customers want. There's a technique known as Kano analysis. Being members of ASQ, you're probably familiar with this one already, but in Kano analysis, one of the things we're looking at is my customer satisfaction, and there are some things that once I meet that customer's need, it doesn't make sense to go beyond meeting their need, because all I can do is satisfy them. I'm not going to make my customer even happier by giving them more of something, but there are other types of customer wants. If I look at fuel efficiency in a car, the more I can give the customer, the more they're going to like it. If I can give them 50 mile a gallon instead of 40 mile a gallon, my customer is going to be happier yet. So the whole idea with the Kano analysis, I need to find out what's important to my customer and offer them more of the things they care about. Well, when I look at these two forces of innovation, what technology makes possible, my technology push, and what my consumer wants to purchase, my market pull, I have four possibilities. If I have neither technology push nor market pull, I have the status quo. Things stay as they are. If I only have if I only have technology push, sometimes this is referred to as a solution in search of a problem. Somebody comes up with an idea that they can do, but just because they can do it doesn't mean anybody wants it. And I have a few examples that I pulled from the U.S. Patent Office. I would personally call these solutions in search of a problem. I have never seen this for sale anywhere, but there is a U.S. patent on toe puppets. Somebody came up with the idea. They thought it was a good enough idea. They spent the money to get it patented, but I've never seen this for sale in a store in the United States or anywhere else that I've traveled. Magnetic glasses. This is another U.S. patent, and U.S. patents cost several $1,000s for the application process, the prior art search, and things like that. Somebody spent a few $1,000s to get a patent for a system for magnetically attaching templeless eyewear to a person. This basically means you have an adhesive disc that has a metallic surface on it. You put that on the temples of your head, and then your glasses can magnetically snap on rather than having the temple of the glasses that go back over your ears. Again, it seems like a solution in search of a problem. I've never seen this for sale anywhere. This is probably the most practical of the items, a wearable seat apparatus, a cushion that attaches to your belt. So if you're going to a stadium, you sit down, you've got a cushion. But again, there's just not a whole lot of market demand for these items. So that's what you have when you have an innovation that nobody really particularly wants. If we only have market pull, there are some things that a lot of people want, but there hasn't been a good solution for it yet. Maybe we don't have the right technology to meet the market demand. In that case, when I have market demand, but I don't have a technology push, I have unmet needs. And as I think about the world we live in, what are some of those unmet needs? We have solar panels, we have wind power. It's not as good as it needs to be. It exists, but we're still looking for that order of magnitude breakthrough in solar technology that will allow us to capture a greater percentage of the energy that comes to the earth every day from the sun. So better methods for capturing renewable energy, that's an unmet need. Clean water, there are some parts of the world this is a basic need that is not being met. Affordable health care, again, there is health care, it's usually pretty expensive, so affordable health care is still something that eludes most people. But the sweet spot in all of this is what happens when I have market push and when I have technology push and I have market pull. That's where the magic happens. That's where innovation really occurs. New materials, new processes, new methods, they are enabling things that might not have been possible 5 or 10 years ago, and they are being put together in a combination that people actually want to purchase. So that's where we're going to focus our attention here, is this upper right-hand corner where there is technology push and market pull at the same time. Now, as I mentioned in the abstract for this presentation, one of the big challenges that face many organizations is figuring out just how much market pull is there. If I'm going to take an idea that I may have and I want to develop that idea and bring it to market, I could be looking at spending a couple of years worth of effort, ordering tooling, doing market assessments and things like that to bring a product to market, only to find out that my sales are way below expectation because nobody really wanted it like I thought they did. So we have a problem of trying to figure out just how many units can I sell or what price can I sell things. This is a picture of a Ouija board with a calculator. It's kind of an attempt at humor of trying to predict something that I really can't know. How can I go about predicting how many units I'm going to sell of something that doesn't exist today? I can go out and I can talk to people and I can do focus groups and ask them, is this something you would buy? How much would you be willing to spend on it? But people are notoriously bad at being able to predict these things, even if I'm asking them, how much would you pay? They may tell me they would pay $100 for it, but when I bring it to market, they're not really sure they want to spend that much money. So let's just take a look at one example. This is a clip of an article from March of 2010. I cited the source for this. But in 2010, a prediction was made about the number of 3D televisions that were going to be sold. The prediction just 8.5 years ago, there will be nearly 50 million 3D TV displays sold worldwide in 2015. So that was 3 years ago, but it was 5 years from when the prediction was made. Within the same time frame, meaning by 2015, around half the homes in the United States could have a 3D capable display. So this was the prediction in 2010 that within 5 years, by 2015, half the homes in the United States would have a 3D TV in the home. Well, this is how it turned out. Fast forward 5 years, as of October 2015, approximately 9% of the homes in the United States had a 3D television in it. So when I look at how accurate was that prediction, it was off by a factor of 5. They thought 50% of the homes would have a 3D TV. In reality, about 9% had a 3D TV. That's absolutely devastating for a company that makes television sets if they have tooled up and spent money to develop those products and then the demand was not anywhere near as high as what they thought it would be. So when I think about how can I do better, if I were in charge of trying to predict market demand for my employer, what are some things that I would look at? And I want to kind of pause right here and let's do an analogy. If my spouse bought a gift for me and I saw this wrapped package sitting on a table, how can I gather information to guess what's inside of it? Because this is kind of an analogy of trying to figure out what type of gift the market would give me if I develop a new product. Well, if I want to figure out what's inside of that box, there's a few things that I could do. I could start gathering clues. I know that it has to fit inside of a certain physical dimension, so I can rule out certain things. I could pick it up and I could shake it to see if it rattles. I could feel how heavy it is. I might try to squeeze it. Of course, there's a risk if it's something fragile, I could break it doing that. I could hold a magnet to it to see if it's metallic. Again, that's not going to tell me what it is, but it would help me to rule some things in or rule some things out. So it would be a clue. If I had access to an X-ray machine, or if I worked in a hospital and I could sneak it into an MRI, I might be able to get an image or at least an outline of what it looks like. If I really wanted to get creative, I could measure it, I could weigh it, I could write an algorithm to go out to Amazon.com, and I know that it has to fit within a certain size and I know it weighs a certain amount. I could let an algorithm go out there and identify things that weigh the same amount and have the right dimensions, so I could generate a list of possible gifts that my wife might have purchased. But if I really wanted to know what's in there, one other thing I could do, and some people would call this cheating, but I could go into my wife's internet browser. I could do a search of her history and I could see what websites she's gone to and maybe what she's ordered. So by going out and checking somebody's Amazon orders, that could be a really big clue as to what might be in this package. So the whole point is, I may not know 100% what's in that package, but I can get a pretty good idea by gathering information. So let's take this idea of gathering clues and see, is there any way I could gather clues about how much market demand there's going to be for a new product? Turns out there's several things that I could do. How could I know how much market demand there is for 3D televisions? Because remember, in 2010, people were predicting 50% market penetration within 5 years. Well, one thing that I could do to start gathering clues, I could go out and look at US, or in Canada, I could look at Canadian Google searches. I could go to trends.google.com, put in my keyword 3D TV, and Google will give me a nice little graph like this that shows me, is the number of searches for that term going up or going down? Well, this was based on US Google searches. But if I look at Google searches for 3D TV between 2009 and 2017, I see that there are a few peaks in there, but overall the trend is going down. This first peak started about the time the movie Avatar came out. So when the movie Avatar comes out, there's a lot of talk about 3D because of the 3D movie. And you'll notice where these peaks occur. There's a peak right when the movie comes out. Then interest drops off. Some companies start talking about we could bring that same experience to the living room. So I see my first peak around December of 2010, and that's where it's near Christmas time. There's a big interest in 3D TVs around December, around Christmas of 2010. It drops to about half the amount of people searching for 3D TV until the next Christmas, and again it peaks, and then it drops off. My third peak is going to be December of 2012, but you notice that peak isn't nearly as big as it was before. People are starting to decide either the technology is not mature or there's not enough content, but interest in 3D TVs, I can tell by December of 2012, it's not going in the right direction. By December of 2013, searches for 3D TV have really dropped off by 2013. December 2014, it's barely a blip. The whole point is there were some clues out there well before 2015 to let me know that people are losing interest. And this doesn't really surprise me. If you go back to the work that Everett Rogers did clear back in the 1960s about the diffusion of innovation, he identified groups of people. And if you think about this purple curve that you see, basically a normal curve, Everett Rogers in his research, he said that you have people that are innovators. The innovators are maybe 2.5% of the population. The innovators, it's just in their nature, they're not happy with the status quo. They're always looking for something better. These are going to be the first people to go out and try something new. Then I have early adopters, and early adopters are also quick to adopt, but they're not the innovators. So the early adopters, as soon as they hear about it, they may be willing to upgrade, but the early adopters aren't necessarily out searching for something to upgrade to. My innovators are the ones that really don't like the status quo, so they're constantly on the lookout for something better. You have the early majority. The early majority are people that are a little more open-minded, but they're not going to be the first to try something. They're going to wait until they hear good things about it from maybe a coworker. Then the late majority and the laggards, those are the people at the end of the curve. But according to Everett Rogers, if I want to introduce a new idea, I want to fan the flames, I want to spread a new idea, what I really need to do is identify my innovators, get my innovators, because they're going to be quick to adopt, they're going to be quick to try my idea because they're always looking for something better. If the innovators have a good experience, word of mouth is going to spread to my early adopters. My early adopters are going to get on board. They're going to talk to their coworkers. My early majority is going to get on board, and in a relatively short amount of time, my product can really take off. But it all starts with identifying who those innovators are. Now, sometimes innovators get burned. Innovators may go out and spend a lot of money on something, and then it just doesn't last. When I think about the video format wars that took place back in the early 1980s, mid-1980s, VHS and Beta came out about the same time. So for a very short time, there were two different competing formats for videotapes. VHS won out. To the people that bought Beta machines, they were happy with them. It was a very good technology, but the market went a different direction. Same thing with Laserdisc. If you look at the two images on the right, the larger disc, that's a video Laserdisc. Those had a very short time that they were on the market. Back in about the late 80s, early 90s, you could go into a music store. You could find movies that were on Laserdisc. They didn't last that long in terms of how long they were for sale because the market just never really embraced that size disc. Several years later, the smaller version came out, DVDs. DVDs were very popular. They were eventually replaced by Blu-ray. Now virtually everybody does streaming rather than purchasing DVDs. But the whole point is, for a person to be an innovator, they're the ones that are out constantly looking for what's better. Sometimes they will invest, and then they get stuck because the rest of the market doesn't follow them. They wind up with something that they really can't use. If I had gone out and bought a Beta machine when videotapes first started coming out, I would have quickly had an outdated piece of equipment because the market went the other direction. So when we take this idea back to trying to figure out what the market demand is going to be, this was Peter Diamandis. He was talking about the 6 Ds of exponential growth, and he referred to the early stage being the deceptive growth. And the deceptive growth is where I'm going from 0.1% of the market to 0.2% of the market. It's still only 0.2%. It's very, very small, but it's growing quickly. people tend to overlook the really small market share, even if it's growing quickly. And by the time somebody notices what's going on, you're into the disruptive growth. And that's where you're starting to absorb enough market share that you're impossible to ignore. What we're really trying to figure out is how can we see market demand while it's still over on the left end of the curve? How can we see that it's growing and that there is going to be better market demand in the near future? Are there additional clues we could look at to let us know what's growing and what's just hype? Well, here's a couple of other techniques that I could use to gather clues. When I think about a technology like 3D printing, one thing that I could do is I could go out to social media. I could use some web scraping software, something like Proveris. They have a suite of tools, QDA Miner for qualitative data analysis, QDA Miner. But I could use software like that and scrape a social media site like Twitter and just have the software go out and grab every mention of 3D printing. So here's an example. This is just one screenshot of data that I scraped off of Twitter. I can see what people are saying about 3D printing. Sometimes they make positive comments, sometimes they make negative comments, but I can measure the volume of mentions of 3D printing. I can measure the sentiment using some qualitative analysis tools, and I could find out, are more people talking about 3D printing in a positive way? Are fewer people talking about 3D printing? Again, it's going to give me a clue as to how big this technology is going to be. My problem with these methods that I've shared with you so far, whether I'm looking at blog comments or whether I'm looking at Google searches, they don't represent any commitment or investment. Anyone can go out and make a positive comment. Anyone can do a Google search. If a lot of people are doing a Google search, that may be an indication that they want to buy something, but they haven't actually put any money up yet. And so this would be similar to getting a focus group together and asking someone, how much would you be willing to spend to buy such and such? They may say, oh, I'd pay $500 for that. That's not a guarantee that I have a sold unit if I actually offered it for sale. So what I would like to do is find some other way that has a little more commitment to it, so it would filter out some of the noise. Well, there's a couple of ways we can do that. One thing I could do is, in the case of 3D printing, I can go out with a premium account on LinkedIn and I can see how many people have the word 3D print in their job title. And I can track that over time. Now, at the time that I ran this page, I went out and did just that. I went to LinkedIn. I did a search for people that had 3D print in their job title. I found 450 people in the geographic area that I was searching. I wasn't searching the entire country, but I found 450 people in a certain geographic area that had the word 3D print in their job title. Now, what I could do is month after month after month, I could go do the same query and I could find out, is this a growing industry? If I go out 2 months from now and find out there are 900 people in that same geographic area, what that means is businesses are investing heavily in 3D print technicians or people that can do 3D printing. So the difference between a Google search and a LinkedIn search, if somebody has this in their job title, it means somebody is paying them to do it. So this represents more of a financial commitment. The other thing I can look at that also has a financial commitment to it is going out and looking at something like Indiegogo or Kickstarter, where people can actually put money up to help bring a product to market. For anyone that might not be familiar with crowdsourcing, and I don't know the background of everyone that's online right now, so forgive me if everybody already knows this, but I'll just briefly describe what this is about. If I have an idea for a product, but I don't have the financial resources to actually make that product, what I could do is make a mock-up of the product. I could do some drawings. I could even make a non-functional prototype. But what I can do is create this product or a mock-up of the product. I can describe it. It would be really nice if it was a functional prototype at least, but I could make a video of it, I could describe it, and I could offer it for sale on a website like Indiegogo or Kickstarter. The way that Kickstarter works, if I determine that I need $50,000 to purchase raw material, to purchase some pieces of equipment, to rent a space to set up a small assembly area, if I know that I need 50,000 units, $50,000, I can start a campaign, and what I would do is offer whatever my product is to people that invest in my company. So I might tell people, if you pledge $100 to this project, I will give you one of these units when they're produced. And then if enough people, if I need $50,000 and people are pledging $100 for each unit, by the time I get 500 people pledging, I've got my $50,000. Kickstarter will take a percentage. I want to say it's about 5% that Kickstarter takes for providing this platform. But if I can convince enough people to pledge for this project, I get 95% of those pledges. Kickstarter takes their 5%. As soon as I get my money, I have a legal and moral commitment to produce those products and give to the people that pledged money to my company. But I can use the money that they have pledged to go out and buy material and buy equipment so that I can actually bring my vision to life. I can go out and start producing this product, and then I'll ship the product out to the people that supported me. It's basically a way that I can do two things at once. Number one, if I do have a good idea that people want, it allows me to get the money so that I can get started, rather than me having to find $50,000 and then hope somebody will buy my product. The second thing, though, is it helps me to determine how much market demand there is. If I come up with an idea that I think is a really neat idea, but I advertise it on Kickstarter and nobody is interested in it, well, that's a clue that I may have been off base. There might not be any market demand for whatever my idea was. So this is just one example right here. This is a person who came up with an idea for making an electronic control for a paper airplane. They came up with a very small part kit. You would take a piece of construction paper, fold an airplane, but that little propeller has an antenna on it. There's an app, and you would be able to fly a paper airplane around the room with your cell phone using this app. Really kind of a neat idea. How many people would really be interested in something like this? Well, what I can see is there are 17,155 backers, meaning 17,000 people said that they would pledge money so that this innovator could come up with the materials and actually go out and make this radio-controlled paper airplane kit. I see that altogether over $1.1 million were pledged by those 17,000 people. And the amount of funding for this project, it was funded almost 50 times more than what he needed. So this is just one example of a project that I would not have guessed 17,000 people would financially commit to, but this was a very, very successful Kickstarter project. So here's what it looked like. The pledges for $55, I could get 2 of these kits, and 117,000 people pledged money in order to get one of these kits. And so, again, this was a highly successful project. Well, if I look across Kickstarter projects, and what I've done with the assistance of 2 students of mine, we went out and we just did a snapshot in time. Actually, the snapshot lasted about 3 months, but we looked at all of the Kickstarter projects during a certain time period, and we categorized them. There were 602 technology projects. Now, I want to point out, Kickstarter is not just for technology projects. There are some people that might want to record an album, produce a movie, write a book, go on a journey and take a bunch of photographs. There's all types of projects on Kickstarter. we limited our scope to just technology projects, meaning somebody has an idea for a physical object. We eliminated creating computer apps. We eliminated websites. We wanted physical, tangible products that were technology related. So we went out to Kickstarter. We monitored Kickstarter daily for about 3 months to see what projects were started, which projects ended, which ones were successfully funded, and which ones were not. So of the 602 projects, first thing we had to do was categorize them. This was challenging. If anyone's interested, I can provide you with the details of our definitions for each category. But there were some projects that were 3D printing related, some were camera equipment, some were fitness and nutrition related. We broke down all of the projects into these categories, and then we started looking at, well, which ones were successful? And let's just look at safety and security, for example. There were about 70 projects that were safety and security related. About 55 of those projects were not funded, meaning the person who created the campaign said, I need $20,000, and they did not get $20,000 in pledges. In that case, no money changes hands. The backers, if he had a dozen backers who said, I'm willing to back this project, but he didn't get enough backers to reach his goal, the backers never have their credit cards charged, and the person never receives any money. So anything in red, that project just died, no money changed hands. Then I took a look at projects that were funded, and I broke it down because some projects are what I call super funded, meaning they greatly exceeded the amount of money that the person wanted to raise. So light green means that it was funded between 100 and 200%. Super funded means that it was funded more than 200%. When I look at this chart, this gives me some idea of what the big topics are. What are people really willing to spend money on? Well, if I look over here at 3D printing, percentage-wise, there were about 18 3D printing projects, but the majority of 3D printed projects that were funded were super funded. So 3D printing was a very hot area. Arduino, that is similar to a Raspberry Pi. It's a small circuit board that you can purchase and make a sensor out of it, make some type of a controller out of it. Arduino projects, if you look at the ratio of what was funded and what was not funded, Arduino projects were very, very popular. But this is just kind of a snapshot of what was funded. This is a different way of looking at the data that we collected. What was the average funding level per project type? So when I look at my 3D printed projects or 3D printing projects, a lot of people were coming up with very innovative designs for new 3D printers. Anything 3D printing related is probably getting funded because on average, they were funded at about 6 times what the person who created the project was trying to get. In other words, if I needed $50,000, on average, I was getting about $300,000. There were a couple of projects that somebody was looking for $250,000. They ended up getting $1.5 million. So 3D printing projects, percentage-wise, very, very popular. Lots of people are spending lots of money on that. So this is looking at the projects by the amount of money that by the percentage of funding they received. This is just looking in terms of total dollars. So across 3D printing projects, there were nearly $6 million pledged in the time frame that we were looking at. The only thing that beat 3D printing was sound projects. This would be things like Bluetooth speakers. So when I start thinking about, based on what I saw in the Kickstarter data, what do I think are going to be the big things that there's a lot of market demand for? Well, sound projects, things like Bluetooth speakers, are huge. If I go out and I look at, well, what are the actual sales now, because this data is about 1.5 years old. If I go out and I look at things like Apple has the HomePod. HomePod is a $350 smart speaker that I like Apple products, but Siri is not the smartest artificial intelligence out there. But they do have a very, very good sounding speaker, the Apple HomePod. Google has their version of a wireless speaker. Amazon has their version of a wireless speaker. what I'm seeing in actual sales, smart speakers are very, very popular. They're in high demand. There's a lot of them being sold. Well, I saw this a year and a half ago in what projects were being backed on Kickstarter. Same thing with 3D printing. 3D printing is running wild right now in terms of the number of 3D printers being sold. Prices keep coming down. But this is something that the data showed me a year and a half ago, that lots of people weren't just saying they were interested. Lots of people were putting up money, nearly $6 million coming in pledges to 3D printing projects. If I come in here and I look, this is actual sales data for Bluetooth speakers. And I look at the growth in U.S. Market, because this is just United States from 2013 to 2017. Between 2013 and 2014, it more than doubled. Between 2014 and 2015, it went up by another 50%. So the actual sales data is reflecting what I saw in Kickstarter, that this is a very popular area. So if I were coming out with a new Bluetooth speaker, what I saw back here was there is market demand for that. If I ask people how much they're going to be willing to spend on new headphones, this is showing what people are willing to spend. A lot of people are looking for low-end things below $50, but 10% of my market is willing to spend more than $150 just on headphones. So this is data that's actually been captured by Statista, but a lot of this were things that I had a clue about. It's very difficult to quantify it and make an exact prediction of how much demand there's going to be, but qualitatively, Kickstarter was telling me before this that sound projects, Bluetooth speakers, headphones, those are going to be very hot items. This is the predicted shipment in units between 2013 and 2016. As everyone knows, Apple did away with the headphone port on their iPhones. Basically, they're pushing everyone to go wireless, and here's what I'm seeing in headphone sales, that headphone sales are very, very good right now in the United States. Well, that's all the information that I had for the presentation. I was trying to shoot for about a 40-minute presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much again, John, for your presentation.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Please post your questions on the Q&A section of the WebEx tool. We have 5 to 10 minutes to answer the questions. And I should remind that you can find the recording of this webinar on ASQ Toronto section website as well as ASQ Toronto YouTube channel. We have 5 to 10 minutes time for questions and answers. You can post your questions on the Q&A section of the WebEx tool. If you have any questions, you can post your questions on the Q&A section of the WebEx tool. I can see one question has been posted. So the question is, when will your project conclude? Will you present your findings?
Probably looking at about another 12 months. What I'm doing right now is based on what I saw in the data. I'm intentionally delaying, waiting to see what the actual market demand turns out to be. So just the nature of the project, it's making it long because I saw some predictors, but now I have to wait to see if the predictions actually come true to know how good of a predictor it was. But I would estimate about another 12 months.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
If there is no question, I think we can end this webinar event.
Okay, well, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and I have my email address here. If anybody wants to contact me, I'd be happy to answer questions in the future.
Oh, I can see one more question has been posted.
Okay.
Any other work you have done on innovation that you are willing to share?
Nothing that's really ready to be shared or published at this time. I do have some other projects that are in process, but they're not far enough along right now that I'm really ready to discuss them yet. But thank you for asking.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, everyone, again for joining this webinar, and have a good night.
Okay. Thank you, Don.
Thank you so much.